The year is 1945. A man we all know, a man by the name of John Lennon, has just started elementary school. And the first assignment, the teacher asks, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" So our young John Lennon walks to the front of the classroom, stands at the chalkboard, and writes, "Happy." So the teacher tells him, "You don't understand the assignment." And he tells her, "You don't understand life." So today I want to talk to you a little bit about life and education and ultimately happiness. And you see, this is important because education is one of the forces that shapes our lives. Aside from our parents and peers and maybe our genetics, it may have the greatest impact on our lives. Now, I've spent a lot of time, again, thinking about life and education and happiness, and that's because in addition to economics, I created the world's first ever Bachelor of Science in happiness. And when I tell people that I'm a happiness major, first they think I'm joking. And then they realize I'm serious, and so they think I've gone crazy. But I think I'm the only sane one. To me, it's crazy not to think about happiness. And the fact that studying it is viewed in this way, I think speaks a lot about the place of education in our lives. See, I believe that education fails us because it's not designed for happiness. And that doesn't mean sitting around drawing rainbows and smiley faces, but using scientific knowledge and philosophical principles to drive positive change. So what I want you to take away from today is that happiness is as important in education as literacy, and we should treat it with the same status. So today I'll ask you to join me as an advocate for happiness education, both inside the classroom and out. We'll begin by looking at this problem, we'll examine a cause, and finally I'll share a solution. So beginning with the problem, I believe that happiness is the definite chief aim of life, but our education does not reflect this, so it fails us. I'd like to share some data on the current state of happiness. Depression rates have doubled from 2009 to 2017, according to the Journal of Abnormal Psychology. According to the National Institute of Mental Health, NIMH, suicide is the second leading cause of death for ages 10 to 34. And another data set from the NIMH says that our children are more likely to kill themselves than they are to die of heart disease or cancer in the next 20 years. This shows that many of us, perhaps most of us, don't have the skills necessary to maintain our mental health and cultivate happiness. We also find that despite all of this progress and technological advancement, we really aren't any happier. That's according to data from the 2018 World Happiness Report that since the early 1970s, GDP per capita, or how much we're all making, has doubled where happiness has remained flat. So we just don't have the knowledge of how to translate resources into happiness. But now that we've seen the problematic state and trends around happiness, let's examine the cause of this problem. I believe that's the fact that we simply don't study it. We don't learn about happiness in school. So let me ask you a couple questions. First, what's the point of life? And that's a tough question, but what do you want out of life? Really think about this. And we might say things like love or freedom, joy, maybe happiness. But next question, what did you learn in school? And we probably say math, science, language arts, technical skills. So what we're saying is that the point of life is meaning, love, joy, happiness, but what we get in school, standardized tests and technical knowledge. See, we're all educated, so we understand this disconnect firsthand. And it's one thing to know it firsthand, but here's a little more data on the place of happiness in our education. The Common Core Standards Initiative describes the knowledge and skills that students should learn within their K-12 education. The first standards document is 66 pages long and outlines curriculum expectations for language arts, social studies, and science. The second document is 91 pages long and outlines the curriculum expectations for just mathematics. Amongst all these common core standards for education, there is no mention of educating for things like purpose, for life satisfaction, for mental health, or for happiness. And this pattern doesn't change in college. According to the University of Alabama Registrar's Office, there were 3,265 courses available this semester alone. But there is only one on happiness. And that's because I created it and I teach it. You see, our education doesn't equate to happiness because happiness is not even in the picture. It's not even on the syllabus. But I think there's a solution to this mess. And it begins with changing our view of happiness. We have to understand that happiness is something to study. It's a subject. In fact, it's life's most important subject. I believe we can really create a movement in happiness education, and I'm not alone. Tal Ben-Shahar from Harvard University also believes this. He created something called the Happier Schools program, and there have now been 2 large-scale evaluation studies published in international research journals of his program. They have shown a significant association between participation in the program and the reduction of symptoms such as anxiety and depression, and the increase of positive emotion, optimism, self-esteem, and academic achievement. Happiness education really works. But again, it's not just about what happens inside the classroom, but about taking ownership of your education. What can we do to cultivate happiness in our own lives? In a seminal paper published by Martin Seligman and Company in 2005, researchers set out to see if individuals really could become happier with knowledge and systematic effort. So they designed these sort of happiness protocols known as interventions and taught them to participants. They found that 3 out of the 5 interventions lastingly increased happiness and decreased depressive symptoms. So it's not just about what happens in the classroom, but becoming a student of happiness in your own life. Today I've shared my belief that our education fails us because it does not empower us to reach our happiness potential. And that's because our education has simply overlooked it as a subject matter. But in the problem lies the solution. And that's happiness education. Remember what I said earlier. Happiness is as important in education as literacy and needs to be given the same status. I wasn't always so focused on happiness. As a freshman in college, I was unsure, struggling with this question of, what should I do with my life? Maybe you've had that question before. And I'm not sure I was necessarily unhappy, but I was a little lost, and honestly, I think I was scared. I was scared of looking back on my life with regret, of looking back and wondering, why did I spend my life that way? And ultimately, I wanted to be successful, but what I realized is that success without happiness is failure. Success without happiness is failure. It's the ultimate failure. And like Lenin, I realized that there was really only one thing worth dedicating my life to: happiness. So I've become an advocate and a student of happiness education. And over the last few years, I've had so much joy creating my major, learning, researching, and my favorite, creating the first ever happiness course right here at the University of Alabama to share this message with others. But above all else, this journey has given me a sense of certainty. Certainty that I've spent my time on life's most important subject, happiness. And I hope you'll spend some time on it as well. Thanks.